So today we're going to do CFO TV in English with three very interesting guests, and that's the reason why we'll be talking in English. Any questions which you have, do ask them in Dutch or in English. I'll just translate them. And today we're going to talk about purpose. And it's the second episode that we're talking about purpose and the essential role of the CFO with, as I said, three very interesting guests. And we have in the studio here Henry Schirmer, the CFO of Randstad. And joining us via Zoom is Javier van Engelen, the CFO from Signify, who's in Portugal at this moment, and also Bart van Praag, the General Manager EMEA of Workiva, who's in North Carolina. And as I said before, but nobody could hear the joke, is enjoying nature also, and we can see his backyard. And we're quite jealous because we're sitting inside, and you're enjoying the freshness of the outdoors, which is very, very pleasing to have. For today, purpose, and I'm going to start with you, Henry. What does purpose mean for you?
Yeah, purpose is, for me, it sort of answers the why you are doing things. The personal purpose, it just gets you going. It's normally the red line in your life, which gives you energy to work on certain things, and a company purpose is more or less the same. And it's an invisible power of energy for me to kind of gives you direction.
And what gives you energy and what you do every day?
So for me personally, I'm driven by affiliation, to be part of something bigger and then help contributing in a team or in an organization to actually to unleash the power of that organization to do it a little bit better tomorrow compared to what you do today.
Yeah, and as a company, as Randstad, of course, you have a very big impact on people's life because you help them get a job, earning money, keeping their family up. That's of course very beautiful to see if you can contribute to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the purpose of Randstad is really developing or helping organizations and individuals, job seekers, or would say candidates, to develop their full potential, and that's pretty much also in line with my personal purpose.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We'll be coming back to that later. Yeah. Javier, welcome. Of course.
Thank you.
Same question for you. What is purpose for you, and what drives you in the job that you're doing?
It's look. I'm not going to repeat what was just said, but it's more than only the red line. It's the ultimate end game. It's what you keep in front of you as where you want to strive to, and as it just was said by Henry, it's what guides you every day on what you want to achieve, not short term but longer term. And I also find it's important. It's where you define what legacy you want to leave behind, right? Let's be modest, in the environment where you can influence. It's starting with your family, with your friends, with your job, with your environment where you live. So I think that's for me the purpose. It's really the guiding light that keeps you on track versus your own values and what you want to leave as a legacy behind.
Yeah. And looking at Signify, what is the thing that Signify wants to change in the world or wants to contribute to?
Well, we have a number of years ago, we have clearly made a purpose statement, and it's not been a typical. Now everyone does it because we started long ago. And the purpose of Signify is look at the extraordinary potential of light and how light can improve lives and create a better world, right? That might be a big statement to make. But if you look at all the places where light is and what light does, different than like on the people side, like Randstad, is there's many occasions that we're surrounded by light, and we really believe that light is essential for everyone. And we can really use that for creating brighter lives and a better world. And we connect that also to the Sustainable Development Goals. So we can talk later about how we do that. But that's the purpose of the company, and that's clearly articulated like that.
Yeah. Thank you. And last but not least, Bart, over to you. What does purpose mean for you?
I mean, I agree with everything that Henry and Javier have said. I would add that the purpose is the connective tissue, right? That connects people within a company to work on a cause that hopefully, transcends just the purpose of the company itself. Something bigger than themselves and something bigger than the company. So I see it's also a link with the ecosystem in which we operate.
Yeah. And also very interesting because you're working from the US last 2.5 years, if I'm not mistaken. Seeing the discussion about purpose, is it different in a different stage in the US versus Europe, or is it quite the same pace?
Well, I mean, look, I think it's a very broad topic, and in the U.S., U.S. companies and U.S.-based companies address this topic obviously head on. I think we all find here that it is difficult to engage, the generations that are coming now out of school, the millennial generation. They're looking for something that is special, right? So we see, like in Europe, in the U.S. Companies struggling with that a bit, right? And particularly now with COVID-19, hopefully behind us a bit. I think it's very much a topic of the day for U.S. companies to work on employee retention, but also at the same time, make sure that people have a sense of meaning in the work that they do. On the one hand, in an effort to retain them. On the other hand, also to adapt to I think a very different world at the moment, and just look at the way companies are shifting from a demographic point of view. You see a lot of companies moving out and employing people outside of the Bay Area or outside of New York. You're seeing people moving towards North Carolina or towards Denver or towards Austin. So if you look at demographic shifts, that's definitely an indication that the pace and type in the way people work have changed a lot.
Yeah. But what I find very interesting with this topic is it has very much to do with what people feel. You have to feel the purpose with it. So it's not very tangible. Is that the biggest challenge with discussing things like purpose within a company and explaining it? It's not really tangible. How do you see that, Henry?
Yeah, I find it pretty tangible, to be honest. I mean, it's very hard to measure at a certain time, but when you go in an interview, for example, when you start engaging with a company, in my case, for example, when I was invited to interview for it, I watched an 8-minute clip of Fritz Goldsmithing explaining how he started founding the company. And I was immediately hooked because I felt it was more dimensional. We have that at Randstad, that simultaneous promotion of all interests, now very modernly probably called stakeholder capitalism, but that was as early as in the end of 70s being reported back from Fritz Goldsmithing, our founder. And you feel that immediately. Then you talk to people and it comes up in all conversations why people get out of bed more or less and why they love their jobs so much. So yes and no, it's hard to manage in the classical sense, but it's still very tangible to feel.
Yeah, and Fritz, what's the reason for you for joining Randstad? You said in the interview.
For that, that was the first I've said, okay, I knew Randstad, but not really double-clicking on it. So, and then I went on YouTube, just put in Randstad, and then I saw that clip, and I thought, wow, that's compelling.
Yeah.
And hearing it from the founder was even more compelling. And you see that deeply ingrained in the DNA of the company.
Yeah, and that's through communication, and delivering what you promise.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's some core values articulated: to know, to serve, to trust, simultaneous promotion of all interests, and that gives, in a way, the license to operate differently. Of course, we also need to be successful in a classical sense. So there's also shareholders. They rightfully want to have a good, attractive return. But no, it is in a way, it's binding the company, but it doesn't feature in your face of every discussion, but it sort of sets you up for the long term. And we always say there's kind of the test of the two questions, whether you do the right thing. The first one is when you decide something, hey, is it in line with those values? But also, would you be proud if it being featuring on the front page of the Financial Times? Or if you tell your mother, would she be proud about you? And if everybody acts like that, you can't go wrong a lot.
Yeah. Is it the same question that you ask people? Would your mother be proud of it, Javier?
Yeah, I think it is. Look, I joined Signify about a year ago, and the decision process was including exactly that, right? It was including even a conversation at home. Hey, what kind of company are you going to work for? And it was interesting. I got challenged. I'm the lucky father and proud father of kids which are now 20, 17, and then a younger of 10. But my older kids also challenge on that. Okay, what you gonna do? What the purpose of that company? So the younger generation, especially, I think, is asking you those questions, and it's good because they hold you accountable for what you need to do. And so I think that's indeed a conversation that comes around. And building on what Henry was saying is, I think it is intangible at a high level, the purpose, but it's our role as leaders in an organization, CFOs or management members, to make it tangible and to walk the talk day by day. So to make sure that people understand what it means, that it can translate in everyday activities. And perhaps the best sign is the less you talk about purpose, perhaps better, because then it really lives in the organization. So sometimes I think like the more you have to talk about it, then it's not really in the DNA of the organization yet. And I think that's one of the ways to see if it really lives in the organization.
And what moment does it start to get difficult on retaining your purpose and the goals that you set versus the let's say the financial situation of a company?
Look, I think about this a bit differently. I think there's been many books written about and or, right? And I think at least I grew up with a lot of paradigms like it's money or it's growth or it's this or that. And I think what we're learning in the last number of years is that there is a way to combine both. So if you look at what the planet needs to the future, and if I talk specifically about Signify, we've got a program which is clearly looking into what we are doing will support the planet to the future. And the sustainability of the planet will also help us as a company because we also have a product line which helps sustainability going forward. And in that situation, it's not a compromise. What we do will serve the planet, will serve the company and the stakeholders, shareholders, plus all the other stakeholders in the broad sense. So in that sense, I'm not debating the either or, because it has to go hand in hand, and we have to find a way to get it go hand in hand.
I think Henry wants to react because he's shifting
on
his chair.
Yeah, no, because I'm so much agreeing to it. In a way, the biggest challenge probably is overcome sometimes that public debate about either or and how can you live with that? No, actually, it's a source of innovation. It's a source of talent, attraction, and retention. Consumers are prepared to pay more for products or companies. Customers want you to win if you're doing the right thing. So the business case could not be clearer. And the more you integrate it in the core of what you're doing, it's a beautiful source of innovation even. So no, I could not more agree to the notion that actually the more you bring it over one thing and not just have a business here and then do CSR, I don't know, planting trees to compensate for what you've done, that is then where the true sustainability sense comes in. So wholeheartedly agreeing.
Yeah. So because there are a lot of companies who use it as a kind of a marketing, let's say, trick. I'm just doing my business and I'm planting 20,000 trees in a year somewhere in Barcelona, or who knows where, and I'm doing good. But that's not really doing good, is it?
No, I mean, it's better than doing nothing. So let me start. At least the intention is there, but truly, if it's truly integrated, truly in the DNA, in the culture, and you don't need to talk about it anymore, that is where it really comes out. And of course, quite often, the ambition formulated in those purpose statements is sometimes quite ahead of how the reality looks like. And especially when the millennials then joining the company come in and say, yeah, but that is not quite 100% pure. And they say, yeah, but we try to be better tomorrow. And it's not, it's worthwhile actually having that gap because you're aspiring to be better next day and stretching yourself into it.
You have to set ambitious goal in order to get
absolutely.
somewhere.
Yeah.
If you only set goals which you know you can make, it's too easy.
Yeah. And it's, if I may, sorry, it's one of the things where actually you try not to be too much ahead of your competition, because what you want is actually to be part of a movement and create that movement. Because what's the point if you're winning in that dimension, then still the planet is not being better or the society is still divided. So in a way, it's one of the things where you want to motivate your entire industry, your entire sector to kind of go along. Then it's really where the impact is coming from.
Yeah. I do sometimes. When I'm listening to you, I sometimes get the feeling that it also sounds a little bit like like in the 70s and the 80s, the hippies that want to change the world, but did they really do it? Did they really change the world at that time? Did they make an impact?
I don't know. You need to talk to the hippies at that time, but I can tell you, it's not also changing the world is a big thing. Doing the right thing, try to be part of the solution rather than being part of the problem. That's what's all about. And I think there's a moral imperative even, because politicians can't solve our problems. It's far too short term, and we need to cut them some slack, but business can. Aligned business can really make a difference.
Yeah, because they want to be there in 10, 20, 30, 50 years. Yeah. How is that for you, Javier, if you're looking at your day-to-day business and talking about purpose, how does the purpose that you have impact the decision that you make every day?
Well, as I said, the trick here is that it has to be ingrained in people's DNA, and then it just becomes part of decision making. So when Signify went out and looked into sustainability and everything which is ESG related, it was already many years back. So it was not. It was when I think there was still a lot of marketing going on, and I grew up with the slogan of improving lives 35 years ago, and I think what's changed is that it used to be marketing slogans, and now we get closer to. We really have to do something. Also because it's expected from our shareholders and our stakeholders that we really become active and we show what we're doing. Signify started way back, 6, 7, 8 years back in a program which was called Brighter Lives, Better World 2020 then, with very clear objectives. And the way we translate it to the business is, number one, each industry needs to decide where can you really act upon. So we've chosen 6 of the sustainable development goals where we believe in our company, in our industry, we can really help, because we can't do everything. So we have already chosen where we can have an impact. And then for each of those, we have clearly linked what we're doing day by day to how we can improve those with clear goals for the next 5 years. We have just reached carbon neutrality in 2020. We have now put a new milestone for 2025, which is kind of doubling the pace of the Paris Agreement. Ambitious, challenging, but there's a clear direction where we want to go. And it's embedded in our strategy, in the products we develop, in how we go to market, in how we act in the office, what products we develop and what we do. That's where it's completely embedded. And of course, from an industrial point of view, we are vertically integrated. We can do that. And that's how it lives day by day. Now, I assume that when you look at Workiva, for instance, with Bart, I'm sure that's also how you see day by day happening. It has to be part of the DNA of every decision.
Oh, your sound is off.
Oh, sorry for that.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a question of DNA. But before you get it programmed in a DNA, what we are seeing with our clients is that you have to dare to revisit and rethink the strategy, and particularly your long-term strategy. And that's for companies in general. I think that we've come out of an age, and I think, Henry, you said that earlier. Look, Milton Friedman was seen sort of as the godfather of economics in many ways, and he said that it's all about shareholder value. It's to actually take resources out of the environment with the purpose of turning that into a profit for the shareholders. And I think extending that by saying, well, it's not about, necessarily taking resources. It's about actually creating value for shareholders and also stakeholders and for the ecosystem in which you operate. Now, that notion of how you actually pivot your company from the Milton Friedman notion of creating value for shareholders to, how do we create value for the ecosystem at large, does require some reworking of the blueprint, so to speak. And I see and we see companies do that with various degrees of success. But what I'm seeing is that for a lot of companies that is a gradual process. It doesn't go from one day to the next, and it does require rejigging and reorganizing processes. That could be, for example, in a company that buys materials from various suppliers, and then the suppliers of the supplier buy materials, and you get this chain of transactions where if you're interested in a carbon footprint reduction, that you need to monitor that, and you need to bring it into your processes also in how you do procurement. So it's not easy. It's a complex issue that we're seeing. I think that obviously, Javier, within Signify, you've gone a long way, and we also see in Northern Europe, you see some companies that are way ahead of the game. But if you look at sort of the main pack, sort of the main majority, right, there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, because what's very interesting in what both Javier and Henry always said is purpose is something that you shouldn't talk about it day to day because then you're probably not doing it right. It should be embedded in the company. And now with new rules and regulations, with ESG, for example, we have to report more and more on it, and you're going to be even maybe penalized if you're not doing very well, if your score isn't good. Isn't that counter active to what you're trying to accomplish, or is it going to help?
Yeah, so maybe if I lead in, I think it's definitely a help to strive for a few standards to be created. And as it's so kind of hot in discussion, you have different frameworks competing with each other a little bit. TCFD framework, there's kind of the IFRS disclosure on non-financial reporting, etc., etc. But in a way, it will help to create a standard for. We also need to step in the shoes of investors and analysts. They want to have a certain view of looking at companies. But that is actually also not the question for us whether it helps or it's not. It's a way of doing business for us. So it's not like we're discussing it even. It just we're doing the things because it's a license to operate. Yeah. We're doing things because we see the business benefit in it. But yeah, it's definitely also some administration which is coming, which is easy for those companies who are already in the right place. And you want to be on the front foot of that and not being kind of a laggard, and then it becomes painful.
Yeah. And it might also, for Javier, for example, if you're in the manufacturing industry, it could help in creating more transparency and seeing what's happening in the chain. So you can also influence not only what you're doing, but also influence in the chain which you're active in.
Yeah, so I'm following up on also what Henry was saying is Signify, we have a program which is probably way ahead of what the standards will be, because we started very long ago and we've linked it again to the Sustainable Development Goals. So regulation will not make us change our mind. We don't have to change anything to buy into regulation. So in that sense, it doesn't help us on what we want to achieve. Now, where I think regulation does help is it creates a bit of a level playing field. You get transparency on who's doing what. It will start having an impact once there's a disclosure and once you start influencing investment decisions. I think more and more as companies start reporting on sustainability and their contribution to society, it's good that there are some rules on what you can say and not say, because it has to become more than a marketing slogan. And at least having regulation on how to track and how to make sure that what you're saying is correct, I think is important for those who do it compared to those who just make it a marketing slogan. So in that sense, despite that there's going to be additional reporting needs, I think those who are ahead of the pack, they'll clearly welcome some regulations to make sure we create transparency, but it has to be consistent and there have to be consequences. Those companies who just do it for getting the numbers done, we always know that there's longer term problems, because you can do it and you can go and work on diversity, work on carbon emissions, all of that, and just make the numbers go. But again, it's not going to be sustainable if it's just kind of trying to hit the numbers. So I think it will help to create a level playing field. And yes, it will help, I think, transparency for those communities and the stakeholders, which is recruits, shareholders, stakeholders. I think that's good for the transparency, that we at least can really judge where do we stand versus the average of the pack.
Yeah, because Bart, I know that in a conversation that we had, you were also saying that it's not only ESG which is very important, but also the taxonomy. So
Taxonomy, yeah.
Difficult word.
Taxonomy, yeah.
To create a universal, let's say, language in that we measure and know all the right things.
Yeah, that's correct. And that's, you see that's what the European Commission is working on right now. They have abstract developing these taxonomies that streamline, the way data is collected and then the way the data is reported. To Javier's point, that's an important notion that, ESG and sustainability, that's not a thought anymore. There's real value in that. Just like, the financial information that's expressed in an annual report expresses value, the non-financial information expresses value as well. So, it requires, I think, the same amount of transparency so you can trust the data that you're reporting. So if you're reporting to your investors or you're reporting to your own employees or your managerial reporting to the authorities, the trust and transparency of data is important. So I think in that sense, that is the role, I think, of the regulator. And it's the role of government to make sure that, to use Javier's term, to make sure that playing field is level. And I think that's a good thing. Question I would have, and it's more a question to Javier and to Henry, if I may, I'm very curious about that, is, how do you look at that from a point of view that let's just assume that, non-financial data and financial data along the lines of the CSRD that need to be reported on in the same annual report and inline XBRL tag, whose responsibility is that going to be to actually manage that part of the business and the implementation of the taxonomies, or is that a responsibility of the CFO, or is there maybe a sustainability chief, sustainability officer? Who knows, right? But how do you look at that in terms of managing the non-financial data streams from its genesis to the moment it gets wrapped up and reported?
Do you want to go first, Javier, or shall I?
Yeah, I can take it on, because it's a debate that, of course, is raging, and I think there's different opinions here. Now, already today, there's a lot of non-financial information which goes in the annual report, right? And the question has been asked also in our organization, okay, where does it sit? Is it the CFO because it came from an annual report on financials and now it includes much additional things? And I think it becomes more a total managerial responsibility of leadership team. So we have a sustainability department, and that provides a lot of the input on all of the input which goes there, which defines a strategy. And it becomes a collaboration between in the management team. So I don't like normally to put things in buckets of one does that, one does that. We all have two hats to play. On the one hand, you're the CFO, but on the other hand, you're part of the leadership team. And as part of that, you collaborate, and we have different people looking at those reports and providing their input. Now, the ultimate responsibility goes to the leadership team and the board of management to make sure that the annual report with the financial and non-financial information is complete. And I think it can come from different sides. Some people think that the CFO should take responsibility. I don't necessarily think so, because I think it's an important topic which is very broad stakeholder management that can well reside outside the CFO. What is clear that the CFO needs to be 100% aligned, in tune, and needs to be able to talk sustainability like he or she talks profit. But I've got no dogma in saying it has to be sit in one place of the organization. Let it sit with the people who know best about it, that can interpret it and then collaborate to make sure it all comes together.
And is it the reason why some people say that it should be with the CFO because of the governance that the CFO is very good in with the financial numbers, so he probably will also be good in the non-financial?
Yeah,
I'm not sure. Look, I'll give it a stab and then I'll give it over to other people. I think it comes more by the fact that the finance person would normally manage the annual report. And this is an annual report, right? And it goes into the annual report. And therefore, in terms of we're going to get audited on it, we're going to have the KPIs to track. So it feels like it's numbers and audits and so on. but it's much more than that, right? And that's why, yeah, there is an angle of reporting and investor relations and so on. But again, I'm more than happy to go to investor relations and I talk about financials, and I've got somebody with me who talks about sustainability. But I think it comes from the typical who owns the annual report. Okay, the finance guy.
Yeah, no, pretty much in line. The topic needs to be owned by the executive board, and more. Actually, the entire leadership team. As far as Randstad is concerned, we are managing the process of collecting the data and creating the reports, because we also have, of course, a CO2 footprint, but we do not have big supply chains. So therefore, we drive with pride what we call an impact report, which is also mainly looking at the economical impact of work and labor and what we do as a company. And yeah, we want to be, in a way, in our sector, driving that innovation in there. So it's also a little bit like to energize the finance function, because we're also connecting the dots. We have the structure. We're a bit of a spider in the net in there, so therefore we're doing it, but totally in line with what my colleague is saying.
And in your points of view, is there also a downside to what is happening now with the ESGs and the scores, etc.? Are there things you are afraid of what might happen in a few years?
No, I think at large it's a good thing that we all talk about it, because it was maybe seen 5 years ago as a nice to have, and now it's totally kind of, you not get going. It's the world is not waiting for you. It's really a license to operate. I mean, those companies who will not start thinking about it and doing something about it, they will be in trouble soon.
So for the short term, it could be that your bank gives you higher interest rates because your ESG score is lower. For example, if you can't get financing because that might be something which is good, which make sure that people go and invest in doing things better. But if things are that transparent, could it be that, for example, within Randstad, they say, okay, you're providing people with a job. It's very good. But you're also providing people who work in a very bad industry who are polluting. That's very bad. Could you be like naming and shaming? Is that something that could happen with it if we take it too far?
Yeah, I mean, if it's true that we are sending people in unsafe working environments, then rightfully so we would be held accountable for it, but we don't.
Yeah.
So
people could say you have like for example Shell. Shell's very bad company, pollutes a lot, and you deliver engineers there. And that they say that you shouldn't do that. That's not good for your ESG score.
Yeah, there are those debates, but of course there's certain reasonableness and common sense to discussions.
So you're not afraid about naming and shaming or things like that?
No, I'm not. No.
And Javier, for you, are you afraid of naming and shaming because people are getting more and more focused on those scores? Oh, your sound is off.
You're mute. Yeah.
Because I want to give Bart a chance to take this one on for a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the rubber hits the road. I think that's the same discussion is going on in Workiva. Would you stop doing business with a client that has a very low ESG and sustainability score? I don't know. We haven't reached that point yet that we have reached any conclusion. What we do see is that, and the reason why I'm smiling a little bit is because, ultimately, you'd hope that companies see that ESG and sustainability can lead to a tremendous amount of innovation and redevelopment of business models in whatever industry you're in. So I sort of, maybe I'm good-natured, but I have a lot of faith that companies are going to be able to adapt and are going to be able to revisit that notion of the contribution they are or are not making to their stakeholders, their shareholders, and also to the ecosystem. So, and then like always, there are some companies that do that, and some companies that will not do that. I think that the way the marketplace works, and it's so competitive that will almost take care of itself.
Yeah, because the upside of it that we're creating a level playing field because everyone is bound by the same rules, at least in Europe and probably America. I've no idea how that will be in Asia and China. Things like how can we get them to join in?
That's why I held my comment for a second, pass it on first to Bart, because when you said about the risks, I wanted to make that point. It's all going to be good on a level playing field, but we all know it's not going to be a level playing field. It's going to be in Europe, it's going to be in the US probably, and if we can get our acts together, it's going to be combined, which is good. But there's a big part of the world that we're missing here, and that goes back to it should not be numbers driven, because we either fully believe that this will benefit us as a company, it's part of our DNA, because if not, you're going to think it's going to be a competitive disadvantage versus what comes from the East, what comes mainly from China, either through subsidies or different standards they have. And that would be the way to derail this. The way to derail this is people will say, oh, it makes me uncompetitive in the Western world versus the East. And I think that's a watch out, because that's going to be a good excuse that people will start using, that, this goes at the expense of. And I think that's something we'll have to watch. And therefore, it has to be something that you're so convinced about that it will drive your competitive advantage over time, even if regulations are not standard across the globe.
Yeah, what we have seen, and I think maybe the pharmaceutical industry is a good example of that with the Council of Harmonization, is that the FDA, EMA have been able to extend into Asia and create that level playing field, right? So that you are producing under certain conditions that comply with European and US law that actually address quality and safety of the drug substance. So it is possible, but Javier, the key point is as you see in life science, you have this Council of Harmonization. Will there be, and that's the question, will there be a Council of Harmonization within the frameworks around ESG and sustainability, and can we connect that at a global level? Because otherwise, indeed, it's going to be difficult to stay competitive if you've got to comply with all kinds of rules and regulations within Europe, for instance. But then you can go into China and do something maybe completely different, right? Because the regulations are not aligned. That is a threat.
Yeah, so I've maybe it sounds naive, but I wholeheartedly believe in the long-term sustainable drive that if you cut corners, you will be caught out, and there's so much transparency in today's world. Consumers vote with their feet and with their purses. So. No, you can definitely, I don't know, for sake of a short-term better quarterly result, do something, but it would never be long-term, and we're here for the long term. So,
yeah. But also, as you said before, I think it was very important that we do keep a little bit ahead of the rest of the competition, just more enough to make an impact and to get them to follow, instead of being too far away and setting yourself out of the picture. I think that's a balance that you have to walk every time.
Yeah, but that's not how you're not playing with that. I mean, you put your best foot forward and you do the right things. And I always found that on the interface of the trade-offs, the contradictions we're all facing in business, the decisions to be made, that's where the biggest value sits. That is where actually the opportunity sits to differentiate your product or your service or how you behave, and you need to lean in. If you see those are the most beautiful moments also for finance, to say, hey, let's kind of do something about it. Let's not. So in a way, pressure is a privilege in also here. So it's really important to embrace that.
What was the because I saw you smiling when you said you're proud of when you're proud of something. What was the last thing you were proud of?
Yeah, you're proud when you walk away, for example, from a business opportunity because you feel it will not serve your long-term goals. And although it's painful at that point in time, you say no. Actually, we stay away from it. We're really selecting out certain segments or industries where we feel we do not have enough clout, and we would really potentially send people in unsafe conditions, or it's not very compliant. And that is where then you're I don't know whether proud is the right word, but you feel good about it. Because when those decisions are being made without any discussion because of the underlying values, then you see you're on the right path.
Yeah. Javier, for you, what was the last decision you made after which you say, I'm very proud I made that decision? From a purpose point of view.
No, from a purpose point of view, we have just restarted as a company, our what we call the Brighter Lives, Better World program 2025. Okay, and it goes a bit back to what also Andrew was saying. Is we haven't really looked at competition, what they're doing. We've put out targets out there on climate action, circular economy, food availability, great place to work, which are extremely ambitious and take us way beyond what the current global accords are. And I think being able to bring that out as a company to your stakeholders, not just the shareholders, to the stakeholders, and to renew that commitment in terms of the Paris Accord, circular revenues, and so on, I think is very powerful. And I think that made me feel extremely proud about, again, the purpose of the company and that we're living this day by day. So I think that's just very powerful that you can be at the front end showing the way. And I agree, competition at some point in time will have to follow. I think we've reached a tipping point that people cannot stay too far behind. But I'm proud that we can lead from the front. I think that makes me proud of where I am today.
Yeah, and for you, Bart?
I mean, we're not in form of manufacturers or in the service business, but I think that for us, we've really are focusing a lot on the social aspects of ESG, and I think that we are heavily dependent also on good talent, particularly in the realm of engineering, and that tends to be a very much a male-dominated segment for some reason. And what we're doing now is that we're recruiting very early already, at the stage that students are still at the university or at the higher technical schools, and to set them up for a potential start in their career in engineering, and I think that's important because diversity and inclusion is also a factor that falls under the ESG umbrella, and companies that are more diverse, are generally more innovative and creative. So I think that. As far as Workiva is managing this right now, I think we're doing the right thing, and it feels good to be part of that, and to set people up for success rather than wait till very late in their career where they it's much more difficult to switch. Be curious to see what Henry from a Randstad point of view would think about that, but getting locked into a certain profession, because of gender bias is an issue that we're addressing head on.
Yeah, no, absolutely same here. We also kind of very much formulated what we want to achieve in line with the SDGs, and we have written down here. We look for decent work, economic growth, reduced inequalities, gender equality, quality education, and when you have formulated that, then you go into those topics which are very much in the core of the business and say, how can we actually promote that? And quite often, the incremental steps are not enough. So you really then dig deeper and say, how can we structurally address to really make a step forward? And that is, I think, where finance can play a very big role in to say, look, we're here today. We want to go from A to B. What needs to be happening, and how can we hold ourselves accountable? And we do exactly the same.
Yeah, and also working very close. Oh, sorry.
No, I think there's one point which has been touched upon earlier, which I wanted to go back on, because we often talk about manufacturing industries, service industries, but where we need to spend a lot of time, and that's, I think, for all of us, education. educating the consumer, educating the customer. Because it's still, whether we like it or not, it still starts with demand from the market. And I've worked for a while in the fashion industry also. Guess what? As long as people are willing to buy cheap things that come from produced in places where you know it's not safe, but it's cheaper and people would like to do that, it's about a lot of education. We also see it in our industry, that when we talk about sustainability, when we talk about why would people choose for connected lighting, why would you choose people for things which are much more better aligned with the values we have, there's a lot of education that people understand why this is better. So I think we shouldn't underestimate the amount of education that still has to happen to the final consumer customer to change their behaviors.
And who's responsible for that in your opinion? Is that something from government point of view, or media, or the companies itself, or a combination of?
I think it's a combination of. I think it starts with education. I think people like what we have here, even recruiting agencies. I think there's a fair part of government education, but I don't think we can pull as companies out of that, because in the end, we still sell to the end consumer, end customers. So I think a part of the education has to come also from us.
Yeah, because as long as people are willing to go to the action and buy something which is 80 cents, we all know where it comes from and how it's manufactured.
Yeah, but many consumers just get by doing it, and so it's also that it's a very, very complex system. But totally agree. But there's also where we as companies, when we have a certain size, we need to take that responsibility to also try to create that, I don't know, structurally better place in our industries. For example, our place, better organized work. Quite often it's just a debate about fixed work, flexible work, but we very much talk about kind of well-organized work where people, even in flex jobs, have access to mortgages, insurance, etc., etc. That, I think, is an imperative for us to drive. And I'm sure you guys do the same in your respective industries to create that level playing field. And but it's not a quick fix, for sure. No.
But and the question that pops up in my mind is the government spend a lot of subsidies on renewable things, on making our companies more green and green. Should they spend more of that money on the educational part instead of giving companies money to innovate? Should innovation come from within the companies itself? Would that be better? It's a difficult one.
I can go Bart, go.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of end-to-end because these are wicked problems. They're complex. That they're going to require not just cross-functional alignment within the companies, but they're going to require partnership between government, companies, and educators. And so I think it's much larger than that, and particularly when it starts to become a topic about how do we make people aware and conscious that what they buy is actually made somewhere, and that there's a consequence there, right? That has an impact on price point, but it's beyond that. It's not just a price point story. I think it's more of a story. Okay, do we accept at this point that I'm wearing a piece of garment that might have been made by, people that are very young, kids or whatever, in a factory somewhere that may have an interesting price point, but the cost of creating that was maybe something that you wouldn't accept and wouldn't allow in the country that you live in. That type of awareness is not just a responsibility of the company. That's a broader social responsibility. I would see it under the umbrella of a collaboration between public and private, which is very difficult to establish, by the way.
Yeah, if I can tag on to that, I'm absolutely where Bart is also. Unfortunately, the level playing field will not happen very fast. And as you said, whether this is because of different labor practices or because there are significant state subsidies, I think we're still in an environment where we'll always have the option to go cheap. That will, in every industry, there will be an option to go cheap if you want to. So that education, I think, cannot just come from companies. That has to come from a general education. All of us working together. The good news, I think, is if you look at the European Green Deal, or if you look at the US infrastructure plan, at least now you see that governments are now really pushing the green agenda. So there's at least a stimulus that when you look at the Green Deal in Europe, that clearly funds are dispersed to really drive that, let's say, purpose-driven agenda. Interestingly, though, and that goes back to the education question that you were asking, Michael, is on the Green Deal, for instance, Signify itself has created a portal for educating how you could use the funds. Because one thing is to make funds available, but then the other thing is to say, like, okay, how should you spend them? And then you find out that there's a lot of education that we can do as Signify to show people why a fast entry point into sustainability could be lighting. But we give examples of what we can do. So that education has to come from also the experts of how can you use those funds and how you can drive sustainability. And that's where you see how it has to work together.
Yeah, I sign off every word. Just an additional aspect. I think at large, sustainability efforts are helping you to be more competitive. That normally drives down the cost per unit. It gives you better branding. It attracts better talent to work with. So, but there are certain industries where frankly, it is very hard to kind of, when we talk about the garment industry, but there are many other industries where actually it helps. It's supporting the CFO agenda in a way, finding productivity. So, and consumers are more and more educated. They are the millennials of the world. They look very much into what's this. Even, I mean, the first case I ever recognized was when Nike, it came out that in their supply chain there were some issues and they tried to kind of stay away from it. And how much have they learned? And that actually we can't shed that responsibility from our end product. So I think we came a long, long way.
Yeah.
And
No, we also came a long, long way because we've been talking about this topic for 55 minutes now. So
wow.
Time is really flying. It's very nice to see the drive and the ambition that the three of you have about this topic. And if I have some takes from this, I think that purpose is, I think, the next thing to drive innovation for companies. It will be the next industrial revolution or something like that. So it's really going to help companies innovate and come up with new products, ideas, and which eventually will make sure that we will still be here in 100 to 200 to 300 years. And hopefully we can get everyone in the world on the same page for that. And I also find it very interesting what you're saying about ESG, that it should help us creating a more and more level playing field, and maybe not for everyone, but yet let's set a good example from Europe, from the States, and from the big companies, and then from there on, let it trickle down to the rest and get them on board more and more. So it's very pleasant to hear that, and let's say hopeful that we will still be here in 200 years. We won't be doing CFO TV in 200 years, because I don't think we're going to make that. So I want to thank the three of you a lot for the conversation which we had. Bart, you also for making this possible, and I think you enjoy talking with the CFOs about what ESG means for them. So if they have any questions, I think they can answer. You can answer them for them. And also I hope to see the three of you on the CFO Day in September. Yeah. We'll hopefully be there with a normal CFO Day, the 20th one, and we're going to have a very nice topic, a brave new world. So we're going to explore a brave new world together, which is this, of course, after 1.5 years COVID. So thank you three for a conversation. Thank the viewers for, again, their attention and their questions. And I do hope to see you again back in September, when we're going to continue this interview series with CFOs with a new name. We're going to call it CFO Studio. It's all because our ambition to build a house of executives with various studios with CMOs and CFOs and CHROs and CIOs, and maybe a combination between the two. Also very nice if you're talking about purpose. Get the CIO and the CHRO and maybe the CMO also there. So it could be something for next season to do. So for now, thank you very much, and I wish everyone a very good day, and hope to see you soon again in September.
My pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure.